Jack and the Earth Shell, Chapter 1. There was once a boy named Jack who was very interested in the world around him and liked to think about all the ways he could see the world differently. To be exact, he actually wondered whether what he saw and experienced was really what was happening. For example, he watched birds rising up into the warm air thermals which rose from the land and thought how great it would be to fly as they did. He was not convinced that flying was impossible for mere mortals and thought there must be a way of becoming weightless and not being stuck on the ground. He realized that when he was swimming in the sea, he could float and feel light and was always disappointed when he came out of the water and was heavy again. The more he thought about it, the more he became convinced that somehow he would defeat the pull of gravity. One sunny morning, when Jack was practicing his diving and swimming under the water, he glanced down and there on the sandy sea floor he spied a beautiful shell. It was the biggest shell he had ever seen, and it was lit up by the sunbeams glistening through the water. There was something odd about the way it shone. It was definitely a blue light coming from inside. He dived down and pulled the shell from its spot in the sand, and as he lifted it from its sandy bed, it seemed to Jack that it made a small noise, rather like a high-pitched voice calling. When he left the sea and returned to the beach, Jack could not help noticing how light the shell was. It still shone blue, and it felt strangely cold. He sat down in the sand to dry off and placed the shell beside him. As he watched the small waves breaking onto the smooth sand, his mind began to wander and he felt sleepy. Suddenly there was a movement beside him. The shell had rolled towards the sea. Jack stood and went to pick it up. As he approached, it moved again. How odd, thought Jack, and grasping it firmly, he turned the beautiful object over and lifted it close to his face to look inside the opening. The shell was empty, except for some loose golden grains of sand which fell out onto the ground. Suddenly, he heard the small voice again, and it seemed to be singing. Jack held the shell in his arms close to his chest, and it was then that the strangest thing happened. Jack's feet and legs began to feel light, and after a moment he couldn't feel them at all. When he looked down, he realized that his feet were not resting on the beach. Instead, he was standing in mid-air. He took a step forward and then another. Soon he became used to walking in the air. It was such a strange sensation. He began to run, and this was easy too. Soon Jack was rising and descending, running a few steps along the beach, and then jumping high into the air again. A gull flew past and stared at him. After a while, Jack landed. He couldn't believe how it had been to feel so free. He placed the shell on the sand and sat beside it. "What are you called?" asked Jack, not expecting an answer. "I'm an earth shell," said the shell. "Wow," said Jack, "you can speak." "Only to those who would listen," said the earth shell. The voice was high and soft, and Jack realized that it was the same one that he had heard in the sea when he first lifted the shell. "I was waiting for you," it said. "Really?" said Jack. "How did you know I would be swimming today?" "I know many things," said the earth shell. Jack was full of questions. "Did you make me fly? Can I always fly now? Can I take you home with me?" The earth shell was quiet for a moment, and then it replied, "Yes, no, and definitely not," it answered. "I live in the sea." "How will I find you again?" asked Jack, feeling worried. "Don't worry, I will find you. If you continue to open your mind to the world and keep believing that nothing is impossible." The earth shell rolled quickly and splashed into the sea, and by the time Jack got to his feet and followed the shell, it was nowhere to be seen. Jack felt a sense of loss, but he mulled over the conversation with the earth shell, and he knew he would meet it again another day.